Are you still in shock having been told you've got cancer? Or perhaps you're still in shock because your loved one's been told that they've got cancer. How do you even know if you're in shock? It's a big question, isn't it? It's a hugely important question because the fact is, once you've dealt with it efficiently and effectively, you're going to heal much faster. So let's have a look at what I did. I managed to get my lymph system clear within 9 months, and I think it's no coincidence that I focused quite hard on getting this sorted out quite quickly. So let's talk about that dreaded moment, the trauma being told you've got cancer. I'll always remember mine because it was Christmas. In actual fact, I was the oncologist's last appointment at 9 o'clock at night, just as the clinic was closing down for Christmas. There will be one sentence that always sticks in my mind. It was when she very sympathetically turned around and said to me, "I'm really sorry. I can give you chemotherapy, surgery and radiotherapy. It may buy you more time, but it won't cure you." Well, that was bombshell number one. Bombshell number two was, "I'm registering you at hospice. They'll be able to give you lots of support." That was the two bombshells. What was really interesting was what happened straight after that. It was almost as if I was watching the whole thing on Cinefilm. It was like a movie. I was taken away from the desk where my husband sitting next to me and the oncologist in front of him were both talking together. I say talking together because their voices were in the distance. The voice that was the loudest was the voice in my head. Now that voice was saying to me, "Are they talking to me? That can't be true. I'm feeling brilliant. Actual fact, I'm feeling a lot better than I felt for years, ever since they removed the tumour." It was very confusing. I know now that what had actually happened was that I'd actually disassociated, which is part of shock. It's amazing really because it's built in, it's served to protect you from the reality of what's happening around you. Now I want to give you a tip at this point. It's really important to make sure that you have somebody to go with you, somebody to support you, not just at this initial oncology meeting, but every oncology meeting. Because what I found happened was that I couldn't participate in the rest of the meeting. So my husband was there, he was able to ask questions and organise the next steps, the procedures going forwards. Now, another really important tip is to make sure that you've not only written down the questions that you want, this will be at the next appointments, the questions that you want to ask, but also record that meeting on your telephone. Maybe get your partner to do it on their telephone because you probably will be fumbling around at this point. So there I was. It was quite typical really for anyone in that situation to feel numb. After all, your body's got into survival mode, it's trying to protect you. So let's come back to shock. How do you know if you're in shock? There's lots of telltale signs to actually know that you're in shock. And one big one that maybe if you can't recognise it, the people you're living with certainly will. And that is that you go through your day looking for what's wrong. It can be just small little things. It's really important to have a routine because if you go outside of what's familiar, it's going to trigger everything that's wrong. Let me give you an example. I'll always remember one day, I think it was when I had my first round of chemo, I was lying in bed and a little bleeping noise was happening in the distance. And I soon realised that it was the carbon monoxide detector near the bathroom that was starting to bleep. Now, in life before cancer, of course, I would have gone down to the shops, bought a battery, popped it in. But no, not when you're in shock. What happened was I remained in bed and I called to my husband to tell him about it. And it wasn't rational the way that I was behaving. So when that alarm was going off, the shocked mind was saying to me, "Oh my God, there's carbon monoxide. You're all going to die in your beds tonight." Or worse, "It's all coming out. It's going to kill you now." So it wasn't like me at all to be reacting like that. I was in such a terrible, desperate state. I was actually on the telephone to my father, getting him to come and sort it all out. It just wasn't me at all. Perhaps you can recognise that in yourself or maybe your loved one. But what else are we looking for? We're really looking for situations where the best way that I can describe it is that you feel spiky. You're living on your nerves effectively, and you can't think straight. Another example of that was life before cancer. It would be quite normal for me to be cooking pasta for my daughter alongside a more adult meal that I'd be making for my husband and I. Life after cancer, you try and continue as normal, don't you? I'd be cooking the pasta. I'd also be cooking something healthy for myself. I started to chop lots of vegetables, salads and things at this point, but I'd also be cooking the third meal, typical meat and 2 veg for my husband. Now what would happen was that normally I'd be able to do that quite easily, but in shock, suddenly I'd realise that the pasta had burnt dry. The meat in the oven was overdone. And when something like this would happen, I would just fall apart. I'd go to pieces. I would just be an absolute blubbering mess. Now the message to you guys is that when that happens, for goodness sake, don't turn around to say to the person, it's okay, calm down. Because one thing they won't be able to do, I'm telling you now, is calm down. That's the worst thing that you could say. So when that happens, go up to them, register their distress, maybe give them a hug, an acknowledgement, and ask them what you can do to help. Yeah, because they won't be thinking straight or seeing straight. So for me, that was a typical life living in shock. So what's actually going on? Let's have a look at the autonomic nervous system. Years ago, when man first walked on the earth, let's think of caveman. The sort of dangers he had to face was fighting off the saber-toothed tiger. Now, he'd only have to do that, let's face it, for maybe seconds, a minute, you know, if he was lucky to live through that. So this primitive part of our brain that's producing all of this adrenaline, all of this cortisol to keep us alive, was meant to be a very short-lived process. But that's not what's going on with cancer, is it? I mean, after all, we can't grapple cancer to the ground and take a spear and kill it. We can't run away from it. It's in us, isn't it? It's going nowhere. We can't pretend it's not happening. Well, we can, that's called denial, but that will lead to another set of problems. So the thing that we do is we end up trying to sort it out in our heads, don't we? The mind starts to loop with all the things that we could be doing to try and cure cancer. But that's not where the solution lies, guys. The solution means that we have to come out of our heads. We have to start feeling. We have to start doing all the things that that caveman did once he'd killed the tiger. Now let's take a look at that. So what can we do about it? Now's the time for a bit of an anatomy lesson, I'm afraid. Because what's actually happening is that we've gone into a parasympathetic response mode. We have this thing called the vagus nerve, which is right deep inside our brain, in that primitive part. And what happens is the vagus nerve goes all the way down our spinal column and ends up in the seat of our stomach. Which, by the way, guys, if you're anything like me, I had terrible stomach problems for the first probably several months following my diagnosis, especially after I've eaten. But of course, I was convinced that the cancer had gone to my stomach and I was dying because I was thinking negative, I was in shock mode. So, the vagus nerve. When we initially have that traumatic moment, we have what's called low vagal tone. So what's happening is that we're feeling unsafe. So it's at this time of danger and stress. So what happens? If we let it go on for too long, it's going to cause depression and inflammation. So it's really quite important that we push it up to something that's called high vagal tone. High vagal tone means that we start to feel safe, relaxed, back as to how we should be. And of course, when that happens, our emotional response, our emotional state starts to level off like it used to be. We become more resilient, which is really important when you're tackling getting well again. And eventually, it does improve our digestion. Yes, my tummy did after a while start to get much, much better as I felt well again. So the vagal tone, we've got to tone up the vagal tone. How do we tone up the vagal tone? It's just like any other thing that you have to tone up, like a muscle. You've got to practice. So how do we practice? We've got to pretend that that saber-toothed tiger has been killed. We've taken our dagger, whatever, we've killed the saber-toothed tiger. Now imagine, there you are, the scene. What's the first thing that you do once you've killed a saber-toothed tiger? Stop, think. You probably go, oh. We're talking breath work here, guys. You take a deep breath. Now, don't change your breath. Watch your breath just this very minute. Chances are it's quite a shallow breath. There's a way of testing this. What I want you to do is take a book, medium-sized book, lie down on the ground and put that book on your tummy. Keep breathing as you're breathing now. And what you'll notice is that that book barely moves. Now, if you imagine a baby when it's sleeping, you probably notice their really cute tummies go up and down, up and down. That's because they're actually taking in proper deep breaths and out again. You get that rise and fall. Practice that with a book on your tummy. Take in that big deep breath, the book will rise, and make sure that you empty fully. Now the important thing here is to make a really nice, gentle, long outward breath. Breathe in, a long, gentle outward breath. That's where the emphasis needs to be, because you need to be emptying all of that old stale air and replacing it with new, breathing deeply. Now, of course, the time to do this is when you're out on those lovely country walks. Learn how to breathe properly. So let's go back to the caveman. He started to breathe properly as he's walking back to the cave, to his wife and children. What's the next thing that he does? He doesn't need to be focusing on the tiger anymore, that's gone. So let's think about the eyes a minute. He's going to start looking all around him, maybe to make sure there's no more saber-toothed tigers. But let's think about the eyes a minute. Once you start focusing on what's immediately in front of you and you start to drift and look all around you, you're actually starting to soften your eyes. A way of doing that is scrunch up your eyes like this, really, really tight, and then release them so they become more gentle. Now at the moment you're no doubt looking at a screen. What I want you to do is to start looking, keep your head still, start looking outside of that screen. Look around the room, looking left and right, and if you've got a window there, start looking out through the window. You'll start to stretch where you're looking. This is what the caveman will be doing as he's walking home. He'll be gently starting to increase his peripheral vision. So that's a good thing to practice, softening the eyes. Now the next thing to do is something called the Valsalva maneuver. This, guys, is all about feeling like you're going to poop. Yep, sorry I've said it, poop. Or let's put it in more polite English terms. We're going to bear down. So take a few deep breaths a minute. Breathe in on 5, nice and slowly. Big deep breath, and what I want you to do is hold it at the top and bear down. So you're effectively going to be doing that sort of feeling. Very gently, guys, I don't want you having piles here. As you gently bear down, you're going to feel that it tightens up your chest a bit. As soon as you finish doing a gentle bear down, you're going to release back down another count of 5. If you can do that in a circular motion, what you're going to be doing is slowing down the heartbeat and relaxing the sphincter muscles. You're basically, let's go back to caveman a minute. He's walking home. He decides to go round behind a bush and relieve himself. He's letting his body know that he feels safe. Everything's slowing down. So here's the caveman. He's walking closer to the cave and he's had a pretty hard day, let's face it. And he's started to think about, it's time to go to bed. The sun's setting. Now what do? We yawn. Take a big, deep yawn. Let your body know that it's safe to go to sleep now. That yawning is a really important message that it's sending to your body. Now there's your lesson on the vagus nerve. Now since I learnt all of this, I've noticed online that there's some most amazing videos out there that give some really nice exercises that you can do to help release that vagus nerve. I thought they might be particularly useful if you're the sort of person that carries tension in your body, your shoulders and things. So take a look down in the description and you'll see the link to these really good videos that I really do suggest that you take a look at. So what does that feel like, having done all of that? I'm hoping you'll start to feel a little bit more empowered at this point. Empowered because once we start taking charge, you actually start to get your energy back. You'll start to feel a lot better. And when we start doing that, we start to have faith in maybe I'm going to be okay. Now I'm going to give you some extra homework here as well as all of the above. What I want you to do is start saying to yourself, I am healthy, whole and healed. Now you might think that's a bit far-stretched, especially if you've got a tumour, but listen to me guys, say it out loud now. I am healthy, whole and healed. Now, I used to use this mantra quite a lot. I particularly loved it if I was driving somewhere. I'd be in the car, windows up, nobody can see you, let's face it, and I'd say out loud, I am healthy, whole and healed. And what I found is that the more loudly that I said it, the more invigorated I would feel. So if you don't drive a car, another idea might be when you're doing the hoovering, when you're pushing the hoover. You know, say I'm healthy, whole and healed. You know, perhaps you won't feel so daft then. But another really good time to do it is when you're stood in front of a mirror. Look closely into your eyes and actually say, I'm healthy, whole and healed. Now you'll feel really strange doing that, but it will actually be having a really powerful impact on you. So even stick a little notice up maybe on the mirror to remember each time you're either brushing your hair, if you've got any, or you know, doing whatever. And make that part of your routine on a regular basis. So the bottom line, guys, is that you really have to start believing now that you can do this. That yeah, you can heal. And so taking that next big step, taking charge, is what next week's video is going to be all about. So if you think that you've learned something from today, you like it, please do press the thumbs up. And if you're ready and waiting for the next week's video, of course, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and I look forward to seeing you then.